I'd like you all to meet the old fat pig we have to put up with." Those words came out of my son's new wife's mouth at their wedding reception. My name is Harold Walsh. I'm 58 years old, and that pig comment changed everything. Standing there in my best Navy suit that cost more than most people make in a month, I watched Monica gesture toward me with her champagne glass while her wealthy family erupted in laughter. The crystal ballroom at the Palmer House gleamed around us, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over 200 guests, white roses and gold accents everywhere, the kind of elegance that screamed money. Then her father's face went white as fresh snow. "Wait, aren't you Harold Walsh, my new boss at Sterling Properties? Let me tell you how I ended up being called a pig at my own son's wedding. The wedding I'd paid for entirely, down to the last flower arrangement. 2 hours earlier, I'd been adjusting Tyler's bow tie in the church vestry at Holy Name Cathedral. The small room smelled of old wood and candle wax, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows onto the marble floor. I was proud as any father could be. "Thanks for everything, Dad," he'd said, not quite meeting my eyes. I knew the wedding cost a fortune, $285,000 to be exact. Not that I was counting. I'd watched him fidget with his cufflinks, the ones his grandfather wore at my wedding 32 years ago before cancer took my wife when Tyler was just 12. "Your mother would be so proud," I whispered, straightening his shoulders. His face had that nervous glow grooms get, but something else too. Relief maybe, like he'd pulled off something he wasn't sure he could manage. But as I stood in that reception hall, listening to my son's new in-laws mock me openly, I realized pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. The Bennett family owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago. Gerald Bennett, Monica's father, controlled a business empire worth millions. What he didn't know was that his company's board had voted me in as CEO exactly 1 week ago. My first official day was Monday morning. The silence in that ballroom was something else. You could hear the soft jazz quartet in the corner, the clink of champagne glasses, the rustle of expensive dresses. 200 guests watching this train wreck unfold in real time. "Mr. Walsh," Gerald stammered, his champagne glass trembling in his manicured hand. The man looked like he'd seen a ghost. I had no idea. "Monica never mentioned what, Daddy?" Monica's voice cut through the tension, sharp with confusion. She looked between us, her perfect smile starting to crack like porcelain. The woman was beautiful. I'll give her that, blonde hair swept up in some fancy style, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. That Tyler's father is Harold Walsh. The Gerald cleared his throat, loosening his black bow tie. The silence spread across the marble floor like spilled wine. Monica's mother, Carol, stepped forward in her silver evening gown, wearing the kind of smile wealthy women learn in finishing school. "Oh my goodness, what a delightful coincidence. You share the same last name as my husband's company." "Not a coincidence," I said, keeping my voice level while my heart hammered. I kept my married name after my wife died. Sterling Properties was built on land my family owned. I inherited the controlling shares when my father-in-law passed 15 years ago. The math was simple enough, even for people distracted by champagne and small talk. Controlling interest, voting power, the ability to hire and fire anyone I pleased. Monica's laughter died completely. The color drained from her face, leaving her makeup looking garish against pale skin. "You're saying you own Daddy's company?" "Not own, dear, control." I gave her the same smile I'd used in 100 board meetings, polite but cold as winter wind off Lake Michigan. There's a difference. Tyler appeared at my elbow then, finally sensing the tension crackling through the air like electricity. "Dad, is everything okay?" He looked confused, glancing between me and his new in-laws like he'd walked into the middle of a foreign film. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone after losing his mother. I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through business school, sacrificed everything to give him every opportunity. But right now, he'd positioned himself slightly closer to his new wife than to me. "Everything's perfect, son," I said, patting his arm. "I was just getting acquainted with your new family." Gerald cleared his throat, his businessman instincts finally kicking in despite the shock. "Mr. Walsh, perhaps we could schedule a meeting next week. I'd love to discuss Monday morning." I cut him off smoothly, 9 o'clock sharp. "My assistant will send you the address." I turned to Monica with my warmest smile, the kind that never reached my eyes. "Congratulations on your marriage, dear. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other." As I walked away across that polished marble floor, my dress shoes clicking with each step, I heard Monica hiss to her mother like an angry cat. "Why didn't you tell me he was somebody important?" "We didn't know," Carol whispered back, panic creeping into her voice. "Your father said Tyler's father was just some middle-class widower. Just some middle-class widower." The words followed me through the crowd of wedding guests, past the ice sculptures and elaborate floral arrangements, all the way to the men's room where I locked the door and stared at my reflection in the gilt-framed mirror. My suit was elegant, my silver watch modest but real. My appearance professional despite the emotional earthquake that had just shattered my world. In that mirror, I saw a man who'd spent 25 years building a business empire in his wife's memory. A man who'd raised a son alone, paid for his education, his apartment, his car, and now this extravagant wedding. A man who'd been called a pig by people who didn't realize he could destroy their entire world with a single phone call. But most importantly, I saw a man who was just beginning to understand his own power. My phone buzzed against my chest. A text from my assistant Linda. Board meeting moved to Tuesday. Emergency HR situation requires immediate attention Monday. I straightened my tie and smiled at my reflection. Monday was going to be very interesting indeed. The path to that humiliating moment had started 18 months earlier, when I'd made the mistake of being too generous with my son's happiness. Tyler had called on a Tuesday evening in March, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant he needed something expensive. I'd been in my home study on Lincoln Park West, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. My desk was covered with quarterly reports from Walsh Enterprises, but I pushed them aside when I heard that tone. Dad, I've got incredible news. Monica said yes. My son was engaged. Despite everything that would happen later, the father in me was genuinely thrilled. That's wonderful, son. When did you propose? Last night at Aurelio's downtown. You know that fancy Italian place where you took me for my MBA graduation dinner? I remembered. The bill had been $380 for two people, but seeing Tyler's face that night, so proud of his degree from Northwestern, had made every penny worth it. The kid had worked hard. For the next hour, Tyler described the proposal in detail. The ring, which cost more than most people's cars. Monica's reaction, her tears, the whole romantic scene. What he didn't mention was how they planned to pay for a wedding. That conversation came a month later. The thing is, Dad, Tyler said that April evening, sitting at my kitchen island, his fingers drumming against the granite countertop. Monica's family has certain expectations. I poured him more coffee from the machine, noting how he avoided eye contact. After raising him alone since he was 12, I knew all his tells. The way he touched his ear when he was nervous, the drumming fingers when he wanted something big. What kind of expectations? Well, her sister's wedding was at the Four Seasons 2 years ago. 300 guests. Very elegant affair. I'm sure it was beautiful. And her cousin got married at the Drake Hotel last summer. Monica's been dreaming of something similar since she was a little girl. I waited. In business, silence was often the most powerful negotiation tool. Let the other person fill the empty air, and they'll usually tell you more than they intended. The venues she's looking at are around $180,000, he said quickly, the words tumbling out. Just for the basics, not including flowers, music, photography, all the other things. $80,000, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. I know it sounds like a lot, but Dad, she's the one. I want to give her everything she deserves. What about what you deserve, I thought. What about what I deserve after sacrificing everything for your happiness? But I looked at my son's face, so hopeful, so young despite being 31 years old, and felt that familiar tug of paternal love overriding common sense. Have you talked to Monica about a smaller wedding? Something more intimate? Tyler's face fell. You don't understand. Her family, they're wealthy, Dad. Really wealthy. Her father owns sterling properties. The irony hit me like a slap. My son had no idea that I'd been quietly acquiring shares in Gerald Bennett's company for years, building toward the controlling interest. My late father-in-law had always dreamed of securing, and you feel pressure to match their lifestyle? I want to be worthy of her, he said, and those 6 words broke my heart. I'd raised this boy to believe he was worthy of anything. Anyone. How had I failed so completely that he thought love required a price tag? Tyler, if she truly loves you, a courthouse ceremony would be enough. Dad, please. His voice cracked like it had when he was 16 and wanted car keys. I'm not asking you to pay for everything. Just help us get started. I'll pay you back once my career takes off, his career. Tyler had graduated with his MBA the year before and was working at a mid-level consulting firm downtown. He was making decent money, around $42,000 a year, but nowhere near enough to support the lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to through Monica's family. How much help are we talking about? Tyler took a deep breath, maybe $250,000, $300,000 at most, $300,000. The number sat between us like an unwelcome dinner guest, sucking all the air out of my kitchen. Tyler, that's more money than most people make in 5 years. I know, but you can afford it, right? Walsh Enterprises is doing well, and after Mom's life insurance, he trailed off, realizing how callous that sounded. My wife Sarah's death had indeed left me financially comfortable. But hearing my son calculate the value of his mother's life so casually made my stomach turn. Let me think about it, I said. That night I sat in my study looking at Sarah's photograph on the mahogany desk we'd picked out together 20 years ago. The picture showed her laughing at some joke I'd made during our vacation in Napa Valley, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her green eyes sparkling with life. We'd built Walsh Enterprises together, starting with a single small office building in River North and growing it into one of Chicago's premier commercial real estate companies. After she died, I'd continued expanding, making strategic acquisitions, building the empire she'd envisioned. What would you do? I asked her picture, my voice echoing in the quiet room lined with law books and family photos, but I already knew the answer. Sarah had always been too generous with Tyler, unable to deny him anything. She'd have written the check without hesitation, probably adding an extra $50,000 for good measure. It was one of the few areas where we disagreed during our marriage. The next morning, I called Tyler and told him yes, one word that would change everything. Looking back now, sitting in that bathroom mirror after being called a pig by my son's new in-laws, I realized that single word yes had been the beginning of my transformation from doting father into something far more dangerous. Because by Monday morning, I would be their new boss, and unlike my son, they were about to learn that my generosity had limits. Monday morning arrived with Chicago's typical October chill, the kind that cuts right through your coat and reminds you winter's coming. I dressed for war, charcoal power suit, Italian leather shoes, silver tie clip that had belonged to my father. At exactly 9, I walked into the Morrison Holdings boardroom on the 42nd floor of the Willis Tower. The room was all glass and steel, with a conference table that could seat 20 people and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Gerald Bennett sat at the far end, fidgeting with his phone like a nervous teenager waiting for bad news. Mr. Walsh, he stood quickly, extending his hand across the polished table. His palm was sweaty. Thank you for agreeing to meet so early. Mr. Bennett, I replied, walking past his outstretched hand and taking the seat at the head of the table, the chair that was rightfully mine. Though I think we need to clarify something before we begin. I opened my leather briefcase with deliberate slowness and removed a thick folder. Inside were stock certificates, board resolutions, and legal documentation that proved my controlling interest in his family's company. The papers made a satisfying sound as I spread them across the mahogany surface. As of last Monday, I own 52% of Sterling Properties, which means this is my boardroom and you work for me. Gerald's face went through several color changes, pale white, then flushed red, then back to a sickly gray. Mr. Walsh, I think there's been some misunderstanding. This company has been in my family for 2 generations. Built on land and initial capital provided by my wife's grandfather in 1951. I corrected, my voice calm as still water. Your grandfather was the junior partner, Mr. Bennett. The contracts are quite clear about the ownership structure. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photocopies of the original partnership agreements, documents I'd spent years tracking down through legal archives, dusty file cabinets, and private collections. Gerald's hands shook as he opened the envelope. Your family managed the business beautifully while maintaining minority ownership, I continued. But when my father-in-law died 12 years ago, his shares passed to my wife, then to me after cancer took her. I've spent the last decade quietly purchasing additional stock whenever it became available. This is impossible, Gerald whispered, but his voice had no conviction. The paperwork was ironclad. The impossible part, I said, allowing myself a small smile, is that you didn't notice. Your own board approved my appointments to key positions over the past 2 years. Your CFO reports directly to me now. Your legal team has been answering my calls. Gerald looked up from the documents with something approaching horror in his eyes. What do you want? First, I want an apology for your daughter's behavior at the wedding reception. Monica can be spirited when she's nervous. She didn't mean anything by those comments. She called me a pig, Mr. Bennett. In front of 200 guests, including my son. She's young. She was overwhelmed by the day, and she's 28 years old and married to my son. I cut him off, old enough to understand that actions have consequences. I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to just above a whisper. Here's what's going to happen. Monica will call me today and apologize sincerely for her behavior. Not because you told her to, but because she understands that respect isn't optional in this family. Gerald nodded quickly, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Of course. I'll speak with her immediately. Second, I continued, pulling out another folder. We're going to restructure this company's employee benefits program. I've had my people review your current policies, and they're embarrassingly inadequate for a business of this size. This was actually true. Morrison Holdings employed over 280 people across Chicago, but their health insurance was bare bones and their retirement plan was practically non-existent. I'd been appalled when I saw the numbers. The improvements will cost approximately $1.8 million annually, I said, watching his face. Consider it my contribution to social responsibility, $1.8 million. Gerald's voice cracked. That's a significant expense. You can afford it, I replied, sliding him yet another folder. I've seen your profit margins, your executive compensation packages, your offshore accounts. This company has been a cash cow for your family for decades." Gerald stared at the financial analysis my forensic accountants had prepared, every expense, every revenue stream, every hidden asset the company possessed laid out in black and white. "Third," I said, "your son-in-law Tyler will be receiving a promotion to senior associate with appropriate salary adjustment. He's actually quite bright when he applies himself properly. I didn't realize Tyler worked here. He doesn't yet," I smiled, this time with genuine warmth. "His first day is Wednesday. Starting salary will be $85,000 plus full benefits." Gerald stared at me like I'd just declared myself Emperor of Chicago. "Mr. Walsh, I need to discuss these changes with my staff, my attorneys." "Your attorneys reviewed everything last week," I interrupted. "Very thorough people." I was impressed with their professionalism. I stood up, closing my briefcase with a decisive snap that echoed through the silent boardroom. "The employee benefits announcement will be made Thursday morning. Monica's apology will happen today. Tyler's promotion becomes effective immediately." I walked toward the door, my footsteps loud on the marble floor, then paused with my hand on the brushed steel handle. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the conference table. "Oh, and Mr. Bennett, in the future, when your family gathers to discuss the middle-class widower your daughter married into, you might want to mention that said widower now controls your family's primary source of income." Gerald's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from Lake Michigan. No sound came out. "Have a lovely day," I said cheerfully, and walked out into my new corporate empire. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like floating. 42 floors of reflecting on the fact that I'd just changed the balance of power in my family forever. When the doors opened onto the marble lobby with its soaring ceiling and abstract sculptures, I felt like a different man than the one who'd entered this building an hour ago. By noon, my assistant Linda had fielded 12 phone calls from various Bennett family members, 6 from their family attorney, and 3 increasingly panicked voicemails from Monica herself. "Mr. Walsh, this is Monica, Tyler's wife. My father explained that there's been some sort of misunderstanding about the company and I wanted to call and, well, I hope we can discuss things like family." I listened to the message twice, noting how she carefully avoided mentioning the pig comment or offering any actual apology. At 2 p.m. she called again, her voice noticeably shakier. "Mr. Walsh, I realize my comments at the reception may have been inappropriate. I was nervous meeting Tyler's family and sometimes I say things without thinking. I hope you can understand. Still, no real apology." Still positioning herself as the victim of circumstances rather than the author of her own actions. The third call came at 4:30 p.m. "Mr. Walsh, please call me back. I think we got off on the wrong foot and I'd really like to make this right. Tyler is upset. My father is having some kind of crisis and I just want to understand what's happening." I deleted all 3 messages without returning her calls. Some lessons can't be taught with words alone. Tuesday morning brought Gerald Bennett to my office door at 8 a.m. sharp, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. My office on the 38th floor of the Aon Center had windows facing east toward the lake, and the morning sun caught the dark circles under his eyes. "Mr. Walsh, please?" Monica is beside herself. She's young and made a mistake. "Surely we can work this out as reasonable people." I gestured to the leather chair across from my mahogany desk. "Mr. Bennett, let me explain something about reasonable behavior. When someone pays for your daughter's entire wedding, venue, catering, flowers, music, photography, reasonable behavior would be gratitude, or at minimum, basic courtesy. You paid for the wedding, every penny. $285,000. I pulled out the receipts I'd requested from Tyler the night before, spreading them across my desk like playing cards. Would you like to see the invoices?" Gerald stared at the papers, bills from the Palmer house, the florist, the photographer, the caterer. His face grew paler with each line item. "She had no idea," he whispered. "No, she didn't. Because your family makes assumptions about people without bothering to learn the facts." I stood and walked to my window, watching the morning joggers along the lakefront path 40 floors below. But here's what I find most interesting, Mr. Bennett. Your daughter felt comfortable mocking the man who paid for her wedding because she believed her family's wealth made her superior. She thought there would be no consequences because she'd never faced any before. I turned back to face him. That's about to change. Monica's real apology came at 9:47 p.m. that Friday night. I was in my study at home, settled in my leather reading chair with a glass of wine and one of Sarah's favorite poetry books, when my phone rang. Her voice was different this time, smaller, stripped of the entitled confidence that had carried her through our previous encounters. "Mr. Walsh, this is Monica. I know it's late, but I couldn't wait until tomorrow. Good evening, Monica. I owe you an apology, a real one, not the half-hearted attempts I've been making all week." She took a shaky breath. "What I said at the reception was cruel and inexcusable. Calling you a pig was wrong. no matter what I was feeling or thinking. You paid for our entire wedding, and I repaid your generosity with insults and humiliation. I said nothing, letting her words fill the silence. I've been thinking about why I said it, and I think I was scared. Tyler talks about you constantly, how strong you are, how successful, how you raised him alone after his mother died. I felt like I could never measure up to the father he describes. This was more honest than I'd expected. So when I saw you at the reception, I saw this elegant, accomplished man, and I felt small. Instead of dealing with those feelings like an adult, I lashed out to make myself feel bigger by making you smaller. And how did that work out for you? I asked quietly. It backfired completely. Now I've hurt the person I should have been thanking. Her voice broke slightly. Mr. Walsh, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. I want to be the kind of wife Tyler deserves and the kind of daughter-in-law you deserve. I took a slow sip of wine, considering her words. There was genuine remorse in her voice, though it had taken the threat of financial ruin to bring it out. Monica, thank you for calling. I appreciate your honesty about your motivations. Does this mean we can start over? We can try? I said carefully, but understand that trust is rebuilt through actions, not just words. Yes, absolutely. Whatever I need to do to make this right. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of my study, surrounded by memories of Sarah and 26 years of building a life together. The events of the past week had changed something fundamental in my relationship with Tyler, with his new wife, with my own sense of what I was willing to accept. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Dad, Monica told me everything. I had no idea about the company situation or how much you spend on the wedding. Can we have dinner Sunday? There are some things I need to apologize for too. I smiled and typed back, of course, son. Your mother's pot roast recipe, 6 p.m. Sunday evening arrived with the first real chill of autumn. Tyler and Monica came to my house on Lincoln Park West, both looking nervous as I led them into the dining room. The table was set with Sarah's good china, candles lit, the smell of pot roast filling the air. This smells incredible, Dad, Tyler said, but his voice was subdued. Over dinner, we talked carefully at first about Tyler's new job at Morrison Holdings, about the changes I was implementing, about the future of the company. But as the evening wore on and the wine loosened tongues, we got to the heart of things. I've been thinking about what Monica told me, Tyler said, setting down his fork, about the things I said to her about you before the wedding. I was wrong, Dad. I painted you as controlling when you were just being generous. I was embarrassed by how much I needed your help. So I made you the villain in my own story. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not the successful young man I'd been trying to create, but someone still figuring out who he wanted to be. We all tell ourselves stories, Tyler. The question is whether we're willing to change them when they stop serving us. Monica reached across the table and touched my hand. Mr. Walsh, Harold, I want to earn your trust back. I know it'll take time, but I'd like to try. As I looked around that table, at Tyler and Monica, at the empty chair where Sarah should have been sitting, I realized something had shifted. The old Harold would have accepted the apology and pretended nothing had changed. But the new Harold, the one who'd emerged from that wedding reception humiliation, had different expectations. Family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates, I said finally. It's about respect, honesty, and showing up for each other when it matters. I'm willing to work on that if you both are. Outside my dining room windows, Chicago stretched out in all directions, a city built by people who'd refused to accept limitations, who'd turned swampland into one of America's great metropolises. As I sat there with my son and daughter-in-law, I felt like I was finally building something that would last. After all, it's never too late to stop being taken for granted, even by yourself. Sometimes people only respect you when they realize you have the power to change their comfortable world, and that's a lesson worth teaching, no matter how late in life you learn it. The difference between being generous and being a doormat isn't the money you spend, it's whether people appreciate the man behind the wallet.